need to make sure that you go on Canvas and look up Canvas and look up your grade and make sure your grade is where you want it to be, because you are running out of time to get stuff turned in, and it's going to be stuck with zeros on anything that's missing. So make sure you are being an advocate for your grade and going through and getting stuff taken care of. All right, river system. Read for us the definition of river system, please, Riley. So key here, a network of flowing water. All right, watershed. Watershed, Jacob, would you read that, please? Area of land for a watershed, network for our river system. So on that next page, we have two pictures. Think for just a minute. One of them is showing a network, rivers, streams, creeks. One of them is showing an area of land. So which one do you think is a river system, on the left or on the right, because it is showing a network? Which one is our watershed? Okay, all right. Network, so this is our river system. Watershed, because this is an area of land. You may or may not have noticed that little red area right here happens to be this red area right there. So river system and watershed, they're related to each other. A watershed is fed, or feeds, I should say. A watershed is fed by the rivers. No. All the water that drains off of the watershed goes into the river. I got it backwards. So the watershed feeds the river system. So on my notebook, I have both of them highlighted the same color. I know, that really threw the morning class off. Because they're related to each other. And I added a little bit of information. There are 78 major watersheds in the continental United States. So continental United States means the states that are connected to each other. So Alaska and Hawaii are not part of the continental United States. Do you remember where Alaska and Hawaii are? Yes. Okay, so if there's one thing that you learned in here, it's where Alaska is. Hopefully there's more than that you learned. If we have time. Do you want one? I mean, I can make time if you really, okay, because I can make it a priority. Right now, it's pretty low on my list of priorities. Okay. You should always up this class on your priority list. Yes. This should be the most important class. So I have boxed in the area where we have both pictures taped in. I've labeled the top one river system, but I boxed in both the same color that we highlighted, river system and watershed. I've labeled the top picture watershed, or river system, sorry. I've labeled the top picture river system. The picture underneath represents one of the major watersheds, and it's the Delaware River watershed. So this is the area of land where water is draining into that Delaware River, into that river system. So this happens to be the Delaware River watershed. It's an area of land where water drains from. It's an area of land where water drains from to enter the river system. Delaware River watershed. It's the the area of land where water drains from to enter the river system. Whether or not the water that falls there drains off or is absorbed in or runs off is determined by porosity and permeability. Please read for us the definition of porosity, Gracie. So porosity, pores, spaces. So rocks can have pores, they can have spaces as well. When you're calculating or looking at the value of porosity within a water or soil sample, the questions that you're looking at is, first of all, can it hold water? And next, how much water can it hold? So think of a sponge. A sponge has porosity. It has these little holes, and it can hold onto water. How much water a rock or soil sample can hold depends on the size of the pores that are in the rock, the spaces that are in the rock, and what percent of the total volume of that sample is space rather than rock material. All right, so having the spaces to hold water is great, but permeability is also very important into whether or not the water is absorbed into the sample or runs off the sample. Please read for us the definition of permeability. Candace. Permeable versus impermeable. So some soil samples, some rock samples are permeable. Some soil samples, some rock samples are impermeable. A couple of other important things we need to add to this is that when we talk about water flowing through, that is super important, absolutely. However, that is not the only fluid and the only thing that's important in the terms of permeability. We need the soil and or rock sample to be permeable to plant roots. If the plant roots can't grow down into the soil, through the soil, then that's a problem. We need the soil to be permeable to gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide because the critters that live in the soil need the oxygen to survive. So permeability is important for water, but it's also important for the gases like oxygen and plant roots. The plant roots need to be able to get through the soil sample or rock sample. So my arrow up means increased. So increased porosity does not always equal increased permeability. Just because a rock sample has more holes in it doesn't mean that the water, air, tree roots can move through. The pores have to be connected in order for the sample to have permeability. Increased porosity does not always equal increased permeability. The pores need to be connected. So if there is some sort of substrate in between the pieces of rock, pieces of gravel, whatever, if there's substrate in between, then you don't have pores. you don't have those spaces or those gaps. And that happens. So a conglomerate rock has chunks of gravel, but it has some other kind of sediment that fills that in there and makes it solid, so it's no longer permeable. This rock has lots of pores in it. It has a great volume of porosity for an igneous rock, but it's not permeable. So if you try to put water on it, it's just going to run off. It's not going to run through because the pore spaces, even though there's lots of them, they're not connected. So it's not permeable. So you can be porous and not permeable. All right, next. Potable. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. We were not ready for a vocab term yet. I forgot. So I have highlighted each term a different color. And then I have boxed in both terms because they also are very closely related. If I had to narrow down porosity to one word, I would say porosity deals with spaces. Permeability deals with the flow. So each one of these have their own color, and then I box them in a fourth actually. So that's second, third, and a fourth different color. And that'll make sense here in just a minute. All right, so we left space down underneath our pictures of the watershed and river system. And so the first thing I need you to do is draw yourself 4 soil samples. So this soil sample has big pieces of inorganic material in it, big pieces of rock. This is somewhat smaller, this is getting even smaller, and these are itty-bitty, teeny, tiny pieces of sediment, almost microscopic. Well, they are microscopic, actually. So 4 soil samples, one has big pieces of rock. Then as you go from left to right, the inorganic material, the rock pieces get smaller. So this is like the other half of, so I wouldn't make them too big. Mine are about 4 lines wide. That seemed to work. Doesn't have to be quite that wide either. We just need to get a general idea of what's happening with the inorganic matter, how big these pieces are, how much space there is between them. That sounds like some microscopic sediment there. Cooperation. Okay, so our soil samples are showing inorganic material that's decreasing in size. So this first one might be something that has a lot more chunks in it, very visible, so probably gravel. This one right here, you can still see the pieces without any aid to your eye, but you have to get closer up, so this might be sand. This one's getting much smaller. You really can't see the pieces very easily, probably silt. And then clay. There's a lot of red clay soil out here in Oklahoma and red clay soil out here. It doesn't look like there's pieces to it. It just looks like a pile of dust, if you will. And when you get some water in there, it's just mushy, just kind of like clay. And that's because the sediment in there is microscopic. It's itty-bitty, teeny, tiny pieces. It is a soil sample that has pieces of material that aren't as big as sand and are bigger than clay. Like silt. So you're familiar with sand, though, right? So you can still see the tiny little pieces, right? So silt is smaller. It's smaller than that, but clay, you really can't see. Like, even think of modeling clay. You can't see the sediment, the pieces that make up that. So it's in between there. It's just a, I don't know. I would have to go do some research because, I mean, that's not one of the things that are a high priority, locations, nearby locations of silt piles. All right. It should be. I will make sure I correct that for the future. So as we go from right to left, the size of the inorganic material increases, and we can see that the space between them also increases. Got lots of space in between these. I've got some space in between these guys. I've got some space in between these. It doesn't look like there's any space in between them because they're small and they're laying on top of each other. So as we go from right to left, we have increasing porosity. And I highlighted that arrow the same color as I highlighted the vocab term porosity. So as we're moving from right to left across these soil samples, it's showing increasing porosity. Because especially with the gravel, I mean, they're touching each other, but there's a path of the water or air or roots to go through it. Because we have those spaces and we have those gaps, we're also showing increasing permeability. And typically you do have porosity and permeability increase as the pieces of matter, the pieces of rock, pieces of sediment, whatever you want to call them, as they get bigger. However, like I said, if you had some substrate that trickled in between there, then that would limit your permeability for that rock sample or that soil sample. Because clay has so little permeability and porosity, if you had clay filter through your gravel sample, that would decrease its permeability. It would decrease its porosity. Porosity increases with larger pores. Permeability increases with more connected spaces. Porosity increases with larger pores. Permeability increases with more connected spaces. Porosity increases with larger pores. Permeability increases with more connected spaces. Porosity increases with larger pores. Permeability increases with more connected spaces. So if the water can't filter down, can't be absorbed into the soil sample, it's got to go somewhere. So it's going to run into the river system. Runoff typically isn't a great thing. We want the water to filter through the soil. It's good for the plants and animals there. They need the moisture. Also, as that water is filtering through the soil sample itself acts as a method to clean the water. So it's going to take out impurities, and the plants can also help remove some of the impurities as well. So we want it to filter through that because it's going to help clean that water. If all you have is water dump on the surface and then run off real fast, not only is it not filtering through and the soil can't clean it, but whatever is on top of that is going to be picked up by the water and carried by the water. So if you just fertilize the area, laid down fertilizer or a pesticide or something like that, and you have a huge downpour, that movement of water is not only going to pick it up, but it's also going to push it off, and it's going to be into the river system instead of on the piece of land where you wanted it. So we need to increase porosity and permeability in order to decrease runoff. All right, post-it note. Runoff is the draining away of water from a surface of land. Runoff is the draining away of water from the surface of land. Runoff is the draining away of water from a surface of land. An increase in porosity and permeability equals a decrease in runoff. Runoff is the draining away of water from a surface of land. An increase in porosity and permeability equals a decrease in runoff. Runoff is the draining away of water from a surface of land. An increase in porosity and permeability leads to a decrease in runoff. An increase in porosity and permeability equals a decrease in runoff. And so yes, my increasing porosity, I highlighted the same color as the vocab term porosity. My increasing permeability, I highlighted the same color as my vocab term permeability. And then the color that I used to box in both vocab terms on the vocab sheet, I've used to box in all of that information. All right. Next term is potable. Read for us the definition of potable, please, Bailey.
Water that is safe to drink.
Okay, simple enough. Chances are you may have at one time or another seen one of those big tanker trucks, big round like tanker on the back of it, and it says non-potable water. Well, non-potable water is water that is not safe to drink. I know not too long ago, wasn't too many years ago, but Hartshorn and Haleyville area, there was either water breaks or there was something going on. I can't remember what it was, but it was like 2 weeks without water in like the whole entire area over there. And so they had to bring in one of those trucks, and it said non-potable water in it, and that's great. I mean, you can't drink it, but you could bathe with it, you could wash stuff with it, you could flush the toilet with it, stuff like that. But if you went over there and took a bucket and you filled your bucket up, it looked like that was like straight out of Hartshorn Lake. It looked like you could have just dumped it out of Hartshorn Lake because it was all that nice little brown color to it. However, I mean, that's better than having nothing at all because that works. But if it's not potable water, then it's not safe to drink. That means it was probably sucked up from somewhere just to use for those kind of basic things. You can make it potable. You can clean that water. One of the biggest ways to do that would be to boil it. So a lot of times when they talk about there's a water break and you need to boil your water, because if there's a break in the pipe, some of that material, soil, whatever was around there would have been sucked in with the moving water, and now it's coming out of your faucet. Well, that might include microorganisms and protists and bacteria, which you don't want in your system. We do want, and we'll talk about in just a minute, the E. coli that belongs in there, we want it in there, but we don't want some other E. coli in there because that will make you sick. However, if you boil that water, if you heat it up, you're sterilizing that environment, like primary succession, if you will. You're totally sterilizing that environment, and it does make it safe to drink. Oh, that's desalination that I wanted to talk about. That's good enough for that. All right, pathogens. Read for us the definition of pathogens, please, Bella. All right, pathogens can cause illness or disease. So these are the guys that make us sick. The thing is that the critters that make us sick are, ironically, in some instances, critters that are good for us. So underneath our vocab, where we have the river system, watershed, et cetera, we left a little bit of room so we can add information about pathogens. So some examples of pathogens. Helminthes, which are worms. Protists, like malaria. Viruses, bacteria, fungi, and prions, which are misshapen proteins. Examples of pathogens equal helminthes, worms, protists, malaria, viruses, bacteria, fungi, and prions. Prions are misshapen proteins. Examples of pathogens are helminthes, which are worms, protists, like malaria, viruses, bacteria, fungi, and prions. Prions are misshapen proteins. Examples of pathogens, helminthes, which are worms, protists, malaria, viruses, bacteria, fungi, and prions, which are misshapen proteins. So when we talked about the different kingdoms and the fact in the animal kingdom, most of the critters in the animal kingdom are invertebrates, well, there's lots of different groups of worms. The helminthes group of worms have a tendency to be parasitic ones, and so they're not good guys. So there's a lot of things that you can get inside of you that make you sick, makes your dog sick. So hookworms, roundworms, those things are really bad, and they are parasites, and because they cause disease, they make you sick. Protists, not all of them are as bad as others, but those are single-celled, mostly single-celled organisms. Malaria is a particularly bad one and what we usually think of as a pathogenic protist. So the malaria protist can get into your bloodstream, and they actually make their homes inside your red blood cells. So as they're living in your red blood cells, they're growing and developing and creating more malaria protists. And so whenever they are fully mature, they break that red blood cell. Well, if they break that red blood cell, then we can't use it to transfer nutrients, oxygen, carbon dioxide that we need, and so that's a bad thing. But even worse than that, they've reproduced, and so now they're going to go and infect other red blood cells. And so that ends up being a very bad situation. Viruses, we talked not too long ago about how viruses can actually be utilized for good as biological warfare. So we can kind of pit them against pests in a natural way. But, viruses that we get in us have a tendency to make us sick, and so they're pathogenic. Bacteria, we've got some bacteria on the surface of our skins, in our lungs, in our gut, that are actually helpful for us and for our survival. The E. coli in our gut help to digest our food. So if you've ever taken an antibacterial, you might feel like really have bad indigestion after you get sick with that, with a strep throat or something, whatever you have to take an antibiotic for. Because the antibiotic wipes out all bacteria. Good bacteria, bad bacteria, it's going to wipe it all out. So it takes a while to reestablish your own colony. But if you get E. coli from some other source and get it in your digestive system, it's going to make you sick. Fungi, mushrooms, yeast, good fungi. Some fungi are bad. Getting a fungal infection in your lungs is particularly bad because it's not like you can just spray tinactin on there or rub a cream or something like that. Your lung tissue is very delicate, and it's very hard to treat an infection that would be in your lungs. Prions, misshapen proteins. So our body makes tons of different types of proteins. Most of them are catalysts or enzymes to speed up or slow down reactions. And so they're very important in getting things running the way that they're supposed to. But if a protein is made and there's a mistake in it and it's not folded the right way, and it's not messed up so bad that it doesn't work at all, but it's messed up just bad enough so that it works, it just doesn't do the right job, then we're in trouble. So mad cow disease, sound familiar? You haven't heard of mad cow disease? Okay, so mad cow disease is a neurodegenerative disease. So it's from prions. And these cows get the prions in their body, and it wears away, it degrades their brain. So, no, it just makes it so that they can't function anymore. So one day they just can't walk, and the next day they can't hold their head up. And so eventually it's going to get to the point to where it's going to get to their respiratory, cardiovascular system, and they're going to die. Yep. I did look that up when that first came out earlier, and I wanted to say that it did have something to do with that, but I can't remember now. I have to go back and look it up again. I remember looking at when it first came out and it was really big earlier in the summer or earlier in the spring. I remember seeing that and looking at that, but I can't remember what it was now. I'll have to go back and refresh my memory. I could do that, couldn't I? 2 priorities for the end of the day today. So it can transfer. So if you handle the infected meat, and get it in your bloodstream, then it can. And there have been cases where that's happened. I don't think it's quite as, you have to handle the material. So it's easier to avoid it than to get sick with it. Yes, and so that's what's a big problem for any cattle rancher that has these kind of cows is because protein is a really tough, durable macromolecule. You can't easily get rid of it. It's not like you can just Germ-X and kill it off. It's really durable. So if they have cows that are infected, they can't just put them down and then bury them or whatever because then the prions are still there within the soil and on the grass and stuff like that, and another cow comes along and eats it, and then they're going to become infected too. So they have to get a really, really hot fire. They have to cremate them to completely destroy that protein. So it's really hard, and it's hard on their herd too to get all of that out of there. And you're going to have a really bad reputation if you're a cattle rancher and you have mad cow disease on your ranch because nobody's going to want to buy that meat. I mean, I wouldn't either. I'd be a little bit worried about it. There is a human prion disease, and that's Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, and so it's basically the same thing. It's a neurodegenerative disease, and once you have symptoms for it, it's fatal, whether you see symptoms or not, but once you are infected by it, it's a fatal disease. And so all you can do is give medication to comfort and deal with symptoms. Right. When there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about that. No, fortunately, unfortunately. However you want to look at that. And so, no, I say that 100% seriously because Alzheimer's runs in my family. So Grandma had it, my mom has it now, and she's kind of really in it. And so you think, well, when you see this happening, well, I don't want to do that to my family. I don't want to do to my son what my mom's, and it's not her fault. It's a neurodegenerative disease. But you can't. You can't in the United States do that, and I understand because then it'll be, oh, well, yeah, that jerk right there. Yeah, he signed an agreement that I can put him down, So I get that. I get it. It's a very delicate balance, but you can't. And so they end up, and you do the best that you can to ease their suffering until they pass away naturally, but it's not an option here. And and it sounds horrible, but I've got to say that I don't want to do to my son, and it's not her fault at all. It wasn't her mom's fault. There's nothing you can do about it. It runs in our family, so I'm looking forward to it. Well, and then that's what you do is you make plans. So live life like it's your last day as it is, and then try to get everything taken care of. That's all you can do. Yes. Highlight pathogens, and then box in the information down below. Yep, and then box in the information that we just wrote. So is it a prion disease? Was it a prion disease? I want to say it was, but I can't remember.
But I remember everybody being worried, how slow deer season was.
Right.
Either a year or 2 years ago, because everybody was like, if you find a deer that has problems.
Right. And so in my brain, I'm kind of mixing it because I remember them talking about they could carry COVID too, so stay away from them because they could transmit COVID. So I can't remember. Yeah. Well, it's not fun. All right, desalination. Brooklyn, read desalination for us, please. Yay. So we have so much of the surface of the earth that is covered with water. But most of that water is water that we can't utilize. You've probably seen a movie where it says, you know, if you're stranded out in the ocean, don't drink the water. Sound familiar? Okay. Okay, hang on just a second. Let me finish my train of thought before we get to that. So in biomed, we talk about water potential, and we talk about the fact that if there's more solute in a solution, more salt, more sugar in a solution, it has less water potential because it's the water's not going to want to leave the solution. It's actually pulling in water from solutions around it or areas around it. So if you are drinking something that has a lot of solute in it, it's actually dehydrating you on the inside. Is pulling your blood ends up being have more solute in it, and then pulls the water from your cells because it wants to stabilize things. I have health careers people in here, right? Yeah. So when you go to the doctor, when you go to the hospital and you get an IV, it's not pure water, right? Do you know? Did they had gone over like what percentage it is? It's like 0.09, 9%, 09%. I don't know. All I know is that saline solution in the IV, it's not pure water. It's a saline solution. Because if it were pure water, then that pure water would go into your bloodstream and it would be bad because you have too much water. You can die from drinking too much water. Too much water in your system, then your blood has too much water in it. Then the water is absorbed into your red blood cells and they are going to alert. I don't know, but there is a possibility of having too much water. Well, I mean, you can drink some water, but you can drink too much. Apple juice has water in it too. You can have too much of anything. So everything in moderation. We don't want too much. We don't want too little. Everything in moderation. That's third on our list of priorities to now figure that out. We've got a good list going here. But if you're drinking that ocean water is very saline. If you've ever been swimming in the ocean and you get it in your face or mouth, it is like hugely salty water. And so that's basically going to dehydrate you from the inside out. But we have so much of it, so we want to put it to use. And one of the ways we can put it to use would be is to desalinate it. Take that water, take the salt out. And so there are processes that do that. When you buy your little bottles of water, jugs of water from Walmart, the store, or whatever, look on the label and see. Is it reverse osmosis? Is it spring water? Spring water means that it's just a natural spring that they probably got the water from. They might have pasteurized it. They might have heated it up. Essentially, like spring water is going to be something that, water hose would probably be more along the lines of reverse osmosis because it's like tap water. Spring water would be something like from a natural spring where it's trickling from a natural spring and they're going to collect it. And I would think that they would pasteurize it. They would heat it up. But reverse osmosis, a lot of times they're trying to force out any particles, any sediment, any additives to it, so all you have is the H2O part of the water. So we can utilize water through desalination. All right.